and welcome to episode 26 of Gar Borras' Time Machine. Gar, today we're going to be talking all about one of our favorite shows, Laverne and Shirley. So when I say Laverne and Shirley, Gar, what are some things that immediately come to your mind?
Lenny and Squiggy.
Okay, yeah, and I'll give you a few others, okay? Laverne, there's an L she wore on all her blouses. That became a trademark of a show. There was, of course, the Pizza Bowl, and all the crazy antics they got into. So we're going to get into all of that. Now, Laverne and Shirley premiered on ABC on January 27th, 1976. So the show is actually celebrating its 46th anniversary this year. And the final episode ran January 27th, May 10th, 1983, for a total of 8 seasons. So that's what we're talking about today.
You know, it's crazy to think how popular that show was at that time. It was actually the #1 show on TV for quite a few of those 8 years.
And I got to ask you, did you see Laverne and Shirley like a lot of us when they premiered, not with their own show, but when they originally appeared on Happy Days? And that's what Laverne and Shirley kind of was a spinoff of, was their appearance on Happy Days, which I think there weren't a lot of spinoff series back then at the time. This may have been one of the first ones.
Well, yeah, that and also another spinoff that came from Happy Days was Mork and Mindy.
Yes. So wasn't it for Happy Days, we wouldn't even be having Laverne and Shirley. I mean, I remember the first time they appeared on Happy Days, it was supposed to just be for an episode. And I remember the episode where Fonzie and Richie are at Arnold's, and Fonz is introducing Richie, who he knows Laverne and Shirley already. He's like, okay, Red, Laverne is mine, as you can see. Shirley is yours. And if you remember the scene, Shirley's kind of like all over Richie, and you could tell he'd never been with a girl like that. And he's like, oh, what is this? You know.
I just remember, Lenny and Squiggy, to me, they used to just absolutely crack me up.
Oh, yeah. I mean, they were a big part of the show. And I guess from what I was reading, part of the reason they for the creation or the addition of the Lenny and Squiggy characters was because they felt that Laverne and Shirley needed like kind of two male counterparts. And as silly as this may seem, like the two guys, David Ellander and Michael Mckean, who played Lenny and Squiggy, they were actually the two that created these characters when they first met in college. And the characters were originally called Lenny and Anthony. But when they decided to have these guys, initially they started out as writers and consultants on Laverne and Shirley. They actually wrote these characters into the script to kind of write themselves into the show. And originally they were called Lenny and Anthony, but Gary Marshall and some other producers decided, okay, we got to change his name from Anthony, because they want, Lenny works great because Lenny and Laverne, and then Shirley and Squiggy. So you wouldn't even think that would be that big of a deal, but that was the whole reason even behind changing Squiggy's name.
Well, yeah, I think Gary Marshall was saying that there was too many Italians on the show already.
Yeah, that's another thing. I was gonna again. You wouldn't even think they would be getting into the race, but again, because this is a spin-off of Happy Days, they decided, okay, it's going to take place in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, but Laverne and Shirley kind of on the other side of the tracks, if you know what I mean, compared to the Cunninghams and Fonzie.
Yeah. But it was really neat because you just have to look at the premise of the two girls being young and single and
working,
supporting themselves. But what is the main thing that young girls back in the mid 1970s? What is it that young girls at that age are doing? They're looking for a guy.
Yeah.
They're looking for, for a relationship. And And it was so comical because the Lenny and Squiggies were the two guys that were constantly, that the girls knew that, they were, wanting to hook up with them, but yet there's just no way.
I mean, yeah, there was that comedy element to that show. I mean, these kind of like you knew they might have wanted to be with the girls, but no way in hell Laverne and Shirley. I mean, they felt like some kind of kinship with these guys. They saw them more as friends. They felt something for them, but that was the whole kind of joke too of Lenny and Squiggy. If you notice, every time they would walk into the apartment, Laverne and Shirley's apartment, or they'd walk into the scene, it'd be after like they'd say something to the effect of, I can't stand this, or this is gross, or this is disgusting, and hello. I mean, that became, a one-word trademark. That became their line. Hello.
Yes, and it worked. I loved it. I loved. I just can't say enough about Lenny and Squiggy. Yeah. I absolutely loved them.
I always thought that it would have been cool, like if Laverne and Shirley went off air, they would have had their own show. But I also kind of think maybe the reason Lenny and Squiggy worked so well, not just because the two guys created the characters and they'd been friends way before they were ever on Laverne and Shirley. They had several years to develop these characters, and by the time Laverne and Shirley comes, these guys were like really best friends in real life. So that's why I think they had such a great chemistry.
Yeah, if you didn't have them as part of the show, I don't think the show would have been as successful.
Yeah, because
it's kind of like they were like, not to take anything away from Penny Marshall and Cindy Williams, but if you take away Lenny and Squiggy, I don't think that the show would have been successful or as successful.
I mean, it's a good example. Kind of reminds me of Seinfeld in the sense that a great ensemble cast. I mean, it was much more than just the two starring girls. Cindy Williams and Penny Marshall. And you got to remember, I mean, there was always kind of women on TV, but probably the only thing that really had any significance before this with a leading female in the cast was maybe the Mary Tyler Moore Show, maybe going back to the Dick Van Dyke Show before that, where Mary Tyler Moore was played Dick Van Dyke's wife, Laura Petrie, But but before that, by the time we get to Mary Tyler Moore, which is a little way before Laverne and Shirley, I mean that was a TV show where the main star of the show was a female lead,
Well, yeah, and that is a groundbreaking thing that was happening at that time because, before Mary Tyler Moore and Laverne and Shirley, it was a male-dominated, main character thing that was going on for TV shows. And,
a lot of these great classic TV shows that we talk about in these episodes, one common theme they all have is a great theme song. I don't know, but even looking back on Laverne and Shirley, very much like on Happy Days, I remember every Tuesday night when I tune in, I just love the opening theme song. I'd sing it word for word, and the theme song I found out is called "Making Our Dreams Come True." What a great tune for that song! I mean, it's really about these two girls. And every week you tune in and you see how hard they work and they struggle to get by. And at the end of the day, they're just like the best of friends. They're always there for one another. The theme song was "Making Our Dreams Come True." It was written by both Charles Fox, who was a composer for film and television. His songs included the Sunshine pop musical background that was part of every 1970s ABC TV show. Love American Style. There's the Love Boat theme. And he also wrote lyrics for the hit song Killing Me Softly, which probably a lot of us know from the Fugees had a big hit with that a number of years ago.
That's a great song.
Yeah. Just a great song. And the song was also sung by Cindy Greco, who was a then unknown singer. The song actually, Gar, charted on the U.S. Billboard Hot 100 chart, peaking at number 21. Can you believe that?
Well, it was a great song. I mean, I didn't know that piece of information, but there was never a time that I ever heard that song that I didn't. I liked it.
Yeah, and actually,
it was more than just average. It was a great song.
And just talking about the song and the TV show together, and what great influences they were on pop culture. I mean, I don't know why this was. It's pretty amazing that it hit number 21, like I said, on the Billboard U.S. chart, but it actually hit a little higher at number 16 on the Canadian charts. So, wow. Talking about having...
another thing that became, just one of those, mainstay, not quite catchphrase, but almost like that, the schlemiel, schlemazel.
Now,
I to this day, I can't even pronounce it.
You and me both, Gar. And
anytime anybody says those three words, everybody knows exactly what's coming.
Yeah, and a funny story about that, Gar. Since the first time I saw that show, I would say, I can't even say it properly, but again, like you said, we know what that is from, and in doing the research for the show today, I actually learned that this is something that dates back to Penny Marshall's childhood. She was the one that kind of wanted to put that in the opening somehow. And what it is it's, which I just can't even imagine this, a Yiddish hopscotch game.
Well, yes, but I mean, it's just, to me, that is, just that little thing, those three words, is so a huge part of the show.
Yeah, and the only thing with Laverne and Shirley, like Happy Days before it, Laverne and Shirley took place, as I said, in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and it took place in the 1950s. And this is very important because we're watching the show originally like in the 1970s, when it's first airing. And when I'm watching it, I'm not really maybe as aware as I am like watching Happy Days that it's supposed to be taking place in the 1950s. I see this now in the research, but as I was watching it, it looked kind of like modern times. You could see that these girls, it seemed like to me these girls are maybe taking place in modern time, but it's actually supposed to be taking place in the 1950s. So, the first couple of seasons, it's taking place in the 1950s, and then when they get to, I think, the fifth or the sixth season, that's when they decide to move the show to California. And a lot of people think that was kind of a mistake, but again, you're watching the newer episodes when they moved to California, and it seems to me like more like it was still kind of modern day, maybe 70s or 80s, you know what I mean? And I think that's part of the reason they did that too, because it didn't, when you watch Laverne and Shirley, it didn't seem so much like it was taking place in the 50s or the 60s.
Well, you're right about that, but I really have to thank you about sending me that link
to the biography,
to that behind the scenes.
Yeah.
Because it was really, really
informative.
About the behind the scenes and all that kind of stuff, and. One of those things that a lot of people don't know about
the behind the scenes.
Laverne and Shirley is they used a lot of the Laverne and Shirley set for 2.5 Men.
Oh wow! I did not. Wow.
And if you look at the stairs on 2.5 Men,
okay,
you'll see the tiles.
Wow.
And then when you look at Laverne and Shirley, you'll see those same tiles. That was pointed out to me a long time ago by somebody.
Wow.
That I didn't know, about that.
Yeah, and here's another kind of interesting. Bit of information I came across. Many people knew Cindy Williams, of course, from her role in the George Lucas directed film American Graffiti, which we did an episode on. And Penny Marshall had previously been on the television version of The Odd Couple. Oddly enough, The Odd Couple, who produced it, Gary Marshall, her older brother. And so, if you go back to The Odd Couple, it was way before Laverne and Shirley. I mean, the character she played was Oscar Madison's secretary in his office. She wasn't quite as outgoing as like Laverne DeFazio, but there were a lot of similarities in that character, and that's, from what I understand, where Penny Marshall really kind of honed her acting craft, was on The Odd Couple.
Yes, and you know, you really have to, you know, hand her credit because she turned out not to be a one-trick pony. She turned out to be like extremely versatile and wound up having a huge career behind the camera.
Yeah, and I think what's interesting, if you go back and watch those old Odd Couple shows that she was on, which I have several times, I mean, I think they still air those like on Decades TV and stuff, anybody that gets cable, but you go and watch those old episodes, and she's very, very young, so she's kind of in the infancy of her acting career, and you can kind of see the potential that's there. And I mean, what's very interesting is, on The Odd Couple, she was not even in one of the starring roles. She was kind of, you know, had a co-starring role, and yet she made such an impact on people. I mean, besides Oscar and Felix, probably the other character you'd really take notice was Penny Marshall's character.
Absolutely. You know, I mean, both her and Cindy Williams, wound up, kind of, honing their crafts in front of us.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I would say, Cindy Williams's early work, say, for example, the stuff that she did, in the movie that we just did, just recently,
Deep Purple?
Huh?
Deep Purple?
No. The movie that Cindy Williams was in with
American Graffiti.
American Graffiti.
Yes, yeah, that's it. Yeah, that's where she got her start.
So we're watching both her and the other girl, honing their crafts while they're in front of us. There's a lot of actors that are very famous and very iconic nowadays that I used to watch them early in their careers when they were doing bit parts.
Or just commercials and stuff, yeah.
You could just tell they were very green as actors at that time, and then went on to hone their skills and went on to become very iconic and very successful actors. But in the beginning, oh my gosh, you can watch them and just see how green they are.
It's interesting you say that because, back in the day, there was a thing where, like, if you were a movie star, you wouldn't even think about trying to do a TV show. It was almost like it was beneath you. And I remember reading and doing the research for a show today. They're saying because Cindy Williams had a big starring role in American Graffiti at the time. Then she had auditioned to be Princess Leia in Star Wars, didn't get the part, but by the time she got offered to do Laverne and Shirley, initially she had turned it down because I guess she kind of thought it was going backwards, but then ultimately somebody convinced her to take the role, thank God. And I think they actually had shot a pilot with a different actress, and I was reading, originally they wanted to call the show Laverne DeFazio and Shirley Feeney, but they decided to shorten the name to Laverne and Shirley. And I was reading, when you're doing a new TV show, especially, and everybody's getting to know the characters, there's a thing about you have to constantly be saying, the character's name. Laverne, Shirley, and so it was Penny Marshall's idea, actually, because she was in the wardrobe room, and she'd seen, letters on some of the costumes, and she said, why don't we have me wear, shirts and that with an L sewn in, so they'll know that the audience will be watching, they know I'm Laverne. I mean, again, kind of amazing to think. That's why I asked you at the top show, hey, Gar, when you think of Laverne and Shirley, what are some things that come to your mind? Well, that's obviously one thing I think of is Laverne wearing all those L's. And I remember watching the show, man, she has to sew on an L on every goddamn shirt she owns, and wears. That must be a lot of work. But again, it's something just so simple, so the audience is going to know, okay, she's got an L on her chest, so she must be Laverne.
Yeah, it makes it easier.
Yeah.
For the audience to know which one was which when they were introducing the show, and it just stayed.
Yeah, and then, another thing that was important about the show is the two title characters, Laverne and Shirley, worked at the fictional Schatz Brewery as bottle cappers. The show took place in the late 1950s, as we said, and was based in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. Now, again, who would ever think about, okay, we're going to have these two girls not just work at a brewery, but they're going to be bottle cappers. I mean, whoever kind of came up with that concept, it was interesting because I first of all, I don't think anybody could, back in 1976, ever imagine two girls like this. They're bottle cappers. They work in a brewery. Oh wow, that's kind of different. But because of that, them working at a brewery and being bottle cappers, it made for a lot of interesting shows.
Well, but you have to also think about it.
Yeah.
In the 1950s, being a bottle capper was an actual job.
Yeah. And again, I don't think they even have that anymore. They have machines that do it. But again, when you go back in time in your time machine to 1976, that's what the world was like back then.
Yes, and it's I think it's hopefully there are younger generations that get pulled into the whole retro thing and discover shows like this and experience shows like this, because it really kind of gives you a window of
the world,
how different life was back in the 50s. And I always kind of, in all of our episodes of this time machine, that just seems to be a
common
intertwining thread that I always wind up bringing up, is the actual time period of the time that they're portraying. Because
Gar,
nowadays, the younger generation would never cross their mind that there would ever be a job.
And
like that actually existed. At a particular time, and it's really kind of it makes your jaw drop at what people used to do for a living back then. Those things don't exist anymore, and they've never existed for a long time.
Yeah, another thing I forgot about, just as we're talking, kind of popped in my mind. Need to make the point that Laverne and Shirley lived in this basement apartment, and if you remember, they were always looking out the window, and the window was kind of like street level. So they're kind of like watching life go by, and it's a very unique perspective. But you look around the apartment, and at one point they didn't even have a TV. Then they went to TV, and it's a black and white TV. But they were so...
Well, it was the 50s.
Yeah, they were just so happy to get a TV, you know what I mean? And then you're looking around that scene, there's not anything that even resembles a cell phone, a computer. And that maybe because of the time they're portraying the show to take place in the 50s, that's very important. But even if you look at, I remember just scenes where they're talking on the telephone. The telephones where it had those big dials where didn't even have a push button phone, but that's how different it was. Those are the days. Even when they're out at the pizza bowl and stuff, guess what? They actually had in some of the scenes a pay phone they were talking on.
Crazy, but I think it would be eye-opening for the younger generations to see how
the world was
much more simplified life was, back in those days, because life is so much more complicated and heavy on details nowadays, and then the younger generation would look back at those days and wonder, well, what if you didn't have cell phones, if you didn't have computers, and you didn't have video games, and you didn't have all these things, life would be so boring. But life was not boring for people back in the 50s and the 60s, even though they didn't have all of that technology. There was a lot more social interaction, because what people would do to fill the time and make it not so boring is there were board games were very popular. Playing card games, it was popular for people to different groups of people to meet up at somebody's house because Tuesday was bridge night.
Yeah.
You see what I mean? So there was and I remember there were games that were really popular back in those days. Backgammon. Oh my gosh! Back in the 1970s, backgammon was such a popular game.
Oh yeah.
Everybody was playing backgammon back in the 1970s. So here I am, being the color commentator, bringing up, not just stuff about Laverne and Shirley, but also, what was going on socially back at the same time.
Yeah. I mean, and it's interesting because that's why I dare say, like, a show like Laverne and Shirley, they don't make great TV shows like they did in the 70s and 80s, and it's for a lot of reasons. But back at that time, I mean, they didn't have video games, they didn't have the computers, they didn't have internet, they didn't have cell phones, don't have the common distractions we have now. And that's a big reason why, like I said, for me, back in the day, Tuesday night was my night to tune in for TV. I mean, I tune in every night, but that was a night for me. Happy Days, Laverne and Shirley, Three's Company. We've done episodes on all three shows now. And the thing is, I remember, even when the time in my life came, all of a sudden they have VCRs. That was a big thing. I mean, before I've even had DVD. Okay, well, if I'm not going to be home in time to see Laverne and Shirley, I can tape it. I can watch it later. That became a big thing,
Oh, it was a huge freeing up thing because it was, for people back in those days, if you wanted to watch a particular show and it was previous to being able to record it, you literally had to be at home in front of your TV on that day and on that time.
And another thing, Gar, that we should bring up about Laverne and Shirley is like a lot of shows from that time. Okay, very much like in Happy Days, they had Arnold, which was a kind of a kids' hangout, and then the guys in Laverne and Shirley, their hangout was the Pizza Bowl. That Laverne's father owned the Pizza Bowl, and then so how many people, maybe not only every Tuesday night or just sometime during the week, would eat pizza because hey, Laverne and Shirley and Lenny and Squiggy eat pizza, and hey, they bowl at the Pizza Bowl. Let's go and let's learn how to bowl. I mean, I bet a lot of people did that.
Yes. Remember again, like what we were saying before, you didn't have all this technology, so what do you fill the time with? And you go out and you bowl, and have pizza. It was a very, what you did back in those days, which is very different from now, was there was a lot of different excuses for social interaction.
Yeah, and as you've seen in the thing I sent you of a biography on Laverne and Shirley, they were talking about some of the behind the scenes stuff, but that the two girls, Penny Marshall and Cindy Williams. I guess they knew each other a little before they actually were on Laverne and Shirley, so they had a little bit of a connection. They were writers, I think, on some other shows, and this is where they really got to know each other, Laverne and Shirley. But and so they had kind of like a lot of stars at the time. They kind of had a love-hate relationship where they really loved one another, and but they were constantly kind of bickering and stuff behind the scenes because, first of all, Cindy Williams realized that, hey, Penny Marshall, it's her older brother that is producing the show. Her father was a producer. Penny Marshall's father was a producer also on the show. I think his name was Tony Marshall, and he wrote some of the stuff. And so she's thinking, okay, Penny's job is pretty secure because her family, they're kind of the one running the show. And then they were always kind of thinking each other. They were worried about who was getting the better lines and that. And there's kind of all this kind of competition going on behind the scenes.
When you have people that have the drive to become that successful, it's highly unusual when you don't have that kind of bickering.
Yeah.
You know, it's part of the personality makeup of people that are successful. Is, you know, you're always being, you know, that way, and it's a personality trait of most people that, you know, that have that kind of success. Not all people, but most people, and so, you know, it doesn't surprise me. To me, it just kind of seems that seems to be a dynamic between a lot of dual collaborators.
Yeah, and then the other thing that was in that clip I sent you, behind the scenes stuff, is the two girls were talking about how they were kind of jealous, thinking like every time Lenny and Squiggy would kind of enter a scene, everybody started laughing at them. They started worrying about those two guys were getting more laughs, that they were getting the better jokes, and there was kind of a rivalry between them. And then the bigger the show got, apparently. They started kind of, the four stars of the show started kind of feuding with the writers. Like, for example, Michael Mckean and David Ellander, who, like I said, pretty much created those Lenny and Squiggy characters. They had a certain idea of what the characters would do and say, and they started getting a little more kind of dictatorial with the writers about, no, they wouldn't do this, they wouldn't do this. And Penny Marshall and Cindy Williams, same thing with the writers. They started kind of thinking they knew the characters and kind of dictating what they thought should be or shouldn't be in the script, you know? And so there's a little bit of that going on as well behind the scenes.
Well, yeah, one of the dynamics of Lenny and Squiggy is that, you know, especially when they were developing the character before they brought it to the show, was that it was all about two clueless wonder dudes that are totally politically incorrect.
Yeah.
And so when they were developing the characters, there were a lot of F-bombs. And there was a lot of, you know, trepidation with the people behind the show was, you know, were they able to, you know, still be able to make those characters funny without all the expletives and stuff. And obviously they proved that they could still be funny, even though, you know, but originally, you know, the expletives was a big part of the Lenny and Squiggy, or the Lenny and Anthony, you know, characters. And
then the other thing is, it's kind of, you know, interesting about it is that, you know, these guys, like you said, David Ellander, the one that played Squiggy, he was saying, like you said, these guys are really just totally, they had no filter, basically. They,
yes, and no filter. And that's the best way to put it.
And he was saying they weren't trying necessarily to be inappropriate. They were kind of these two simpletons that kind of, whatever you asked them, they would honestly give you their honest opinion without kind of worrying about what came out.
Or what the repercussions or the reaction was going to be. And that's what made their characters so funny, was that inappropriateness.
Oh yeah, and that's what created.
And I just loved it. You know, it was just, to me, you know, well, how did we start this whole episode? Me bringing up them. You know, I just love their characters, and you know, and of course Michael Mckean, you know, has become extremely famous on his own, because when he left Laverne and Shirley, you know, before they did the last season, he left to do Spinal Tap, which went on to become hugely successful and iconic.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, I'm glad you brought that up, because when I post this next week, and I'm going to see if I can find this interview clip I'm about to tell you about, I seen something where Rob Reiner was kind of talking about Spinal Tap and, you know, Lenny and Squiggy being on Laverne and Shirley. A lot of people may not realize, but back in the 70s, Rob Reiner and Penny Marshall were married, and they both went by their, you know, kind of given surnames. But anyways, the point is that I heard Rob Reiner talking about, just as they were getting ready to launch Laverne and Shirley, he apparently had known Michael Mckean and David Ellander. They were friends of his. And they had a party at his house and Penny Marshall's house one day, and they invited some of the cast from Laverne and Shirley. And he was the one, Rob Reiner told them, hey, why don't you guys do those two characters tonight at the party? Penny's brother, Gary's going to be there. I think he'd love what you guys do. And if it wasn't for Rob Reiner, those two guys, Lenny and Squiggy, may never have ever ended up on Laverne and Shirley. So that's just kind of amazing story, from
happenstance.
Yeah, and I'm like, wow, just think about that.
Yes, it's that if this wouldn't have just out of the blue happened, and that shouldn't, then this would have never actually turned out the way that it was. And it's crazy to think how many shows have that element.
Yeah, and
that just one thing, just a little bit different, and it could have changed everything. How everything turned out.
And to take that to the next level, I don't think they could have got any two actors, no matter how great of an actor. You could get Jerry Seinfeld, and I don't think he could do Lenny and Squiggy as good, just for a lot of reasons. Partly because those two guys knew Lenny and Squiggy so well. You know why? Because they were the creator of those characters. They'd been doing those characters since they were in college and they first met together. And as far as Michael Mckean having huge success with Spinal Tap, the funny thing about Spinal Tap, and we are going to do an episode eventually on Spinal Tap, but the thing is, while Spinal Tap is just one movie, the success he's had because of Spinal Tap, I remember not just seeing the film, but when Spinal Tap released, some music, they released an album for the first time, and oh wow, it's an actual band. I thought it's kind of a mock kind of band, but the guys in the band, he's actually can sing. Michael Mckean, for example, he can actually sing and play guitar. And in fact, as part of the success, I think you can see this on YouTube. Part of the success of Laverne and Shirley, Michael Mckean and David Ellander as Lenny and Squiggy, they actually released a rock album called Lenny and the Squigtones. And
I saw a picture of that.
Yeah, and I come across some of the videos. I'm going to try to post those as well because it's just hilarious. And it's kind of, it's real comedy because you might think, these guys trying to be rock stars or whatever, but you got to take it kind of like, Batman releasing a single, Miranda or whatever the song was. It's fun for what it is,
Well, but at that time, back in the mid-'70s, whenever you had something that was hugely successful, then there was always people that approached these, main characters from hugely successul TV shows, let's do an album. Oh, okay, I can't sing, but okay, let's do it. You know what I mean? William Shatner is another one of those famous people from a hugely famous show that they did the same thing, right around the same kind of time period. People approached him, let's do an album. And then, William Shatner couldn't sing, so he spoke. It was the spoken word over music. Album, and but it was kind of a common thing during that time period. Let's try this, because you never know what kind of aftermarket they could try to do that could, just be hugely successful too because of the show.
And Leonard Nimoy did that too because of Star Trek. And by the show's third season, Laverne and Shirley became the most watched American television show at that time. It remained number one for several weeks and several months. That's just amazing. It's, the life that show.
In that documentary that you sent me, they were talking about how just to put things in perspective, at the height of popularity of Laverne and Shirley, they were getting a 50. I guess what they say, a 50-point share.
Okay.
And then to compare that to Seinfeld, which was also hugely successful, at the height of Seinfeld, they were getting a 30-point share.
Yeah, I'll be posting some of this stuff that we're talking about on our Facebook page next week when this gets posted. But another thing, talking about the height of popularity of shows like that at the time. I mean, Happy Days 1, Three's Company, Star Trek, all these shows we're talking about. Laverne and Shirley, obviously. I mean, they made the cover of like People magazine. I think there's a People magazine cover with all four of the stars: Laverne, Cindy Williams, Penny Marshall, Michael Mckean, and David Ellander. There's a shot on People magazine. They had several covers of TV Guide, which is a big thing back in the day. That not only to have a hit show, but you wanted to have a TV Guide cover because every week when people buy a new issue of TV Guide, oh wow, yeah, I'm going to watch that.
Okay. Now you just hit onto something.
Yeah.
TV Guide is something that does not exist anymore.
Not like it used to, anyway. Yeah.
But back in the 1970s, when TV Guide existed, that was like for an actor or an actress, that was the equivalent to being a musician and being on the cover of Rolling Stone.
Yeah. So true.
To have your picture on the cover of TV Guide was the equivalent of that. And it was to have your picture on the cover of Rolling Stone was so popular that there was even a hugely popular song about that.
Yeah. And another thing that you will be aware of from watching that documentary I sent you was that Laverne and Shirley became known as a television show that featured physical comedy between Penny Marshall and Cindy Williams. Now, this is a big deal because if you watch any Laverne and Shirley episode, there's constant physical comedy between the two main stars. And that's important because you need to remember, I was hearing that Gary Marshall got his start, her brother, in TV, like working on the I Love Lucy show. And he's saying like Laverne and Shirley kind of was a modern day Lucy and Ethel is what he based it on.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and if you ever heard John Ritter talking about his time on Three's Company, he's saying a big part of that show was his ability to do all that kind of crazy physical comedy. In his case, he did it with his body and all kinds of crazy antics, but that was a big part of that show. And in fact,
Laverne and Shirley.
Yeah, in fact, I was reading that they actually, I think it mentioned it in that document, that they received some kind of award from the Hollywood Stunt People Association or something like that for all the stunts they did on the show.
Well, other comedy shows at the same time period did not want to do slapstick because slapstick is so difficult to do.
Yeah.
It looks easy because they're all clumsy and doing all, but to take slapstick and make a woman falling down look funny is not an easy thing to do.
And then you talk about the physical comedy. How many scenes in all the episodes of Laverne, or you got these two crazy wacko girls. They love each other. They hate each other. They're fighting. I mean, I remember scenes where they're pulling each other's hair. They're ripping each other's clothes off. I mean, just crazy stuff like that. And you could not help but break out in laughter.
Well, that they were fearless.
Yeah.
As actresses and as comedians, they were fearless. They were willing to try anything.
Yeah.
If it was going to result in laughter.
Yeah.
That meant that whatever they were going to do was successful. They had absolutely no problem at being considered the number one TV show, for slapstick comedy.
Oh yeah, I mean, and again, let's break down some of the characters here. Okay, of course, Penny Marshall played the role of Laverne Marie DeFazio. Laverne is a tough-talking, loudmouth tomboy who grew up in Brooklyn, New York, with her Italian parents. The DeFazio family then moved to Milwaukee, where Laverne's mother dies. Laverne's favorite drink is milk and Pepsi. And again, the milk and Pepsi is a big part of the show.
I have to try that.
Yeah.
Can you hear me pounding on the desk?
Yeah.
No, I have to try that. I am totally interested in trying milk and Pepsi.
And again, I've heard interviews where Penny Marshall says this is another thing she brought into the show. This is something, I guess this was her favorite drink as a child, something she created. Milk
I guarantee you it's an East Coast thing.
Yeah. And it became, again, it became a tradition of a show, something, it was scripted, but this, again, her idea, and so, and again, we talked about the L. That was, and another thing, we'll get into, Cindy Williams' character of Shirley, but another thing I always remember, like when I think of Laverne and Shirley, one thing comes immediately to my mind, and this was just like one episode where Shirley was always kind of portrayed as one with big dreams and big hopes, and I remember one of the episodes, I don't even remember what the episode was about, she just starts breaking out into song. You want to know why, Laverne? You want to know why? It's because we've got high hopes. We've got... that stuck with me. I just do not know why.
Huh?
I do not know why, but that when she breaks out into that song, just in one episode, that stuck with me. When I think of Shirley's got high hopes. She's the dreamer.
Well, it's just, another thing that was brought to my attention watching that documentary was they, what's her name? Penny Marshall.
Yeah.
Her brother Gary Marshall. His TV shows were very appealing to
family.
Middle America.
Yeah, the family.
You know what I mean? His stuff was prime for prime time. 8:30 time slots and everything like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Everything he touched was like
gold.
Prime time type of TV shows.
And what's interesting about that is you look at Laverne and you look at probably his two biggest shows at the time, Happy Days and Laverne and Shirley. There's a lot of similarities, a lot of differences. I mean, one of the main differences, you look at the Cunningham's family on Happy Days, much more kind of really of your traditional family oriented. I mean, you got the mom, the dad, and the son and the daughter, traditional family. Whereas Laverne and Shirley, it's not so much a traditional family. I mean, let's look at the characters. I mean, okay, we got Laverne and Shirley. They're two besties. They've known each other. We're assuming for at least since high school, and they're the best of friends. You got Laverne's father, who raised her. He's around. You got these two goofy guys, Lenny and Squiggy, and then of course Shirley's on again, off again. Boyfriend Carmine, the big ragu, and that was another kind of joke that ran throughout the show. It's like, okay, is she with this guy or not? Because he'd call her Angel Face, and you could tell he was crazy about her. And apparently, he was always trying to get some from her. Oh, that's another thing in that documentary we should bring up. Because of the time when the show took place in the 1970s, they could not even say make love. They could not say they did it. I mean, they came up with this own kind of phrasing. Did you vote-do-do? And they're talking about having sex, but they could not even.
And it's so funny.
Yeah.
It's so comedic. It's even better than using the appropriate term.
And it's so funny because, again, watching the show, even as a kid, not really knowing what it meant, but yet I was able to, okay. It means
but yet you can figure it out.
Yeah.
But Gary Marshall's stuff was so prime time and everything like that, and what they did. So because the 1970s had its social controversies of that time, and it was really popular to make TV shows that addressed those social issues that are going on at that time. And Gary Marshall, so he could sidestep that, did the time period of Laverne and Shirley of the 50s.
Yeah.
Which totally, now they can completely sidestep all of that and just focus on the storylines of the show instead of trying to make the storylines of the show tie into social issues of the time.
Yeah, and I want people to know what I'm getting ready to kind of discuss right now. I kind of put this in my own words, but it kind of very, just kind of a breakdown of all the characters. So, talking about Cindy Williams' character, Shirley, you may remember this. Her actual name was Shirley Wilhelmina Feeney, again played by Cindy Williams. She is the perky, positive one, and Shirley is not as outspoken as Laverne. Shirley is a huge fan of then teen idol Fabian. Shirley is the one who tends to overreact to things. Shirley has a special relationship with her stuffed animal Boo Boo Kitty. You remember that when she get like...
She basically portrays every guy's sister.
Yeah. In fact, talking about her on again, off again boyfriend Carmine, sometimes they're just friends. Sometimes you see them dating other people. It's like, okay, are they together or not? And then I remember in the documentary I sent you, he was talking about, he had to take a lot of cold showers, Carmine supposedly, because he could never get any from her. But he was constantly trying. And, but I
like his, the ragu.
Yeah, the big ragu. And then talk about the character of Lenny, of course, played by Michael Mckean. Leonard, Lenny Kanowski, lives with his best friend Squiggy in the upstairs apartment from Laverne and Shirley. And Lenny and Squiggy are constantly pestering Laverne and Shirley. I mean, that's kind of the whole gimmick between the four characters. These two guys they don't actually hate them, but these guys drive them crazy. They love the girls, but they're constantly, in each other's lives. And that's kind of what made the show. Lenny is a lovable goofball who works as a truck driver at the Schatz Brewery, where Laverne and Shirley also work. While Lenny is not 100% sure, he believes that his last name is Polish for "there's a hog in my kitchen." Again, but it kind of explains the character, and that's why the show worked. You need all these characters, and then the funny thing is, like I said, okay, how many people in your life? Okay, you have these people that live in your apartment, and they also just happen to work in the same place that you work. It's kind of interesting. Like another thing I think they mentioned in that documentary I sent you was when they decided to move the show to California. That was another thing is they thought, okay, we're going to make them, they're not going to work so much, but they're going to want to be like Hollywood starlets and stuff. How many times in life, do you move far away and then all of a sudden all your family and all your best friends, they pick up and move with you? I mean, they had to do it, I guess, to make the show work, but you know what I mean?
I think it was a bad idea.
Yeah.
One thing that I've noticed is whenever Lenny and Squiggy enter a scene on the show, they always burst, open the door and burst through the door.
Yeah, in fact,
he says hello like that, and it just became
a joke.
That's how they always entered the scene, was bursting through the door. Well, guess who also absolutely had to have been influenced by that and embraced that for his character was what was that guy's on Seinfeld?
Oh, Kramer.
The tall curly-haired
Kramer. Kramer.
Yes, Kramer. That's exactly how he used to make his entrance on Seinfeld.
Yeah.
Bursting through the door, you know what I mean? He kind of threw his own, thing into it, but, Lenny and Squiggy, actually did that and actually started that method of entering the scene.
Yeah, in fact, that's another thing I kind of wrote down here. Lenny and Squiggy would almost always enter every scene as Laverne and Shirley were talking about something unpleasant. They'd enter every scene with their trademark "hello." The producers believed there was already too many Italians, as we said, so they decided not to call Squiggy Anthony, but they made him a German. Okay, we need to have a German in the show, so we're going to call him Andrew Squigman, Squiggy for short.
Hey, to me, I don't care. Their characters were so funny. And Michael Mckean, we're probably going to wrap this up pretty soon.
Yeah, we're getting ready to.
Michael Mckean doesn't currently do it, but he did a show that I still watch to this day. Yeah. And I absolutely love it. And I highly recommend anyone checking it out. You can go to YouTube and type in food fact or fiction. It was a really popular show that was on the Food Network.
Oh, okay.
And Michael Mckean is the guy behind the show, that does the show. Wow. And the whole premise of the show is every food that we eat and every dish, all these different dishes that are, classic American dishes and stuff that we all are familiar with, all has a history and a story behind it.
Oh, sure.
How it actually came to be.
Oh, sure.
And those stories are so interesting and great information for anyone if you want to collect, subjects to bring up, at the dinner table. Yeah. Great conversation pieces. But Michael Mckean does that show, and I highly recommend to anyone, check out that. It's called Food Fact or Fiction, and you can find it on Food Network because it's no longer on TV. Sometimes they'll resurrect it and start showing it again on the Food Network.
Oh, okay.
Kind of like reruns.
Yeah.
But it is such an incredibly great show. It is not a waste of time. There is always interesting stories that you'll really scratch your head and go, oh my gosh, I never knew that.
Yeah, and we are getting ready to wrap this up. Before we do, just a couple things I got to mention real quick. David Ellander, who played the part of Squiggy, died in Los Angeles, California in 2020 at the age of 73 from complications. Now, see, that's the thing, Gar. Like I said, this show is celebrating 46 years this year, and as far as, when it premiered.
Wow, 46 years.
And, I remember seeing David Lander do some interviews shortly before he died, and he had some gray hair. He did not look like 73. This is the thing. This is how we know we're getting older. I mean, I'm about ready to turn 51, and this show is 46 years old. So for most of my life, this show has been on the air at some point in time. And you realize you're getting old, too, because, like even Cindy Williams, she looks still pretty good for her age. I mean, she's close to, she's like in her 70s or close to 80. And you wouldn't know by looking at her, she's still acting. But here's the thing. A lot of the actors on the show have sadly passed away. In fact, there's only 2 stars that are still alive, and that would be Michael Mckean, who we talked a lot about, and Cindy Williams. They're the 2 remaining. And like I said, as much as the bickering that went on behind the scenes, like I seen a thing that Cindy Williams did recently, and she was just like, it's so sad. Me and Michael are only remaining cast members. I just miss Penny Marshall. She's meant a lot to me, and you don't realize when you're going through these silly little feuds and you're bickering with one another what they really mean to each other.
Yes, and it's just another snapshot of time.
Yeah.
That I think all of America should thank them for putting on that show and entertaining us in such a high caliber, highly talented manner.
Yeah.
All of them. Just for putting on such a great show, and I think there are millions of people in this world that to this day are still very grateful for them to have that kind of creativity to put on such a wonderful show.
Yeah, people can buy this stuff, on DVD. I mean, just in prepping for a show today, I was watching some old episodes on my DVD collection, and I just was loving every minute of it and just cracking up. And they don't make shows like this. And like a lot of shows, the show finally kind of ran its course, and the reason it was eventually canceled is, I mean, by the time the show ended, Cindy Williams had left, and they continued to call it Laverne and Shirley, as you saw. But it really, how could you call Laverne and Shirley just has Laverne, and then at one point Michael Mckean leaves, and it's not even Lenny and Squiggy, and I think the show ran its course too, because could you imagine if the show was still on there, and and there it's only really Cindy, Shirley and Lenny. I mean, that's the thing with as great as Lenny and Squiggy was. I just, even if Michael Mckean had wanted to go out and take those characters on tour, I just don't see him wanting to, or that he'd really be able to do it without his partner. You could get somebody else to kind of maybe pay tribute to David Ellander, but it just wouldn't be the same Squiggy.
No. Better left.
And
you know what I mean?
Final thing, Gar.
It's just a great show, and I'm very, very, very thankful to you for bringing it up.
Well, it's one of those shows I've been wanting to do, and then final thing we're going to wrap it up with today, but I think you'll be interested because we talked a little bit about the fact that Penny Marshall previously was in The Odd Couple. I don't know if you look at the Laverne and Shirley apartment. This might be of interest to you. In 1970, when The Odd Couple TV show ended, the apartment set on that show was later made into Laverne and Shirley's apartment.
Oh my gosh! Then it's got 3 huge shows to its history.
Yeah.
It's the same set for The Odd Couple that was used for Laverne Shirley and then used again for 2.5 Men.
Yeah, okay.
And I made a mistake when I was bringing that up. When you look at the staircase, it doesn't have the tiles.
Yeah.
But when you look at it, it is obvious it is the same, set.
Isn't that kind of trippy? And before we go, Gar, I just want to thank you once again for doing this. I had a blast, as I always do, and I want to wish you a happy 4th of July. And before we go, just let the folks know that when we do this again in 2 weeks, because I think it was during our episode for The Price is Right, the subject of the Gong Show came up, and I thought, man, that's a show I kind of forgot about, but we're going to be doing that next time around.
Oh, absolutely.
So you take care, my friend, and I'll be in touch. And this show will be going up next Saturday. So you take care, Gar.
Okay, man. Thank you. Happy 4th to you too, brother.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Okay.
Chaotic Riffs Magazine.